So today's talk is going to be on what makes websites successful, and it's going to be given by Derek, who's our senior web developer. If I could just ask you all, if you have access to the Wi-Fi in the black box, if you could turn it off, because we're doing a live stream today. The video will be uploaded straight after this here onto our YouTube channel. We can get back and have a look at any of the points that Derek has brought up. Derek will make his slides available as well. And if you can hold your questions until the end of the talk, I'll have a wee Q&A. And afterwards, if anybody wants, we'll be hanging about for 15-20 minutes if you want to pick our brains, have a wee chat about things. Feel free. So I'll pass over to Derek.
Thanks for that thunderous round of applause there. Okay, so now says I'm Derek, developer at the Tomorrow Lab. I make websites. And today I'm going to talk about not everything that makes your website successful, but narrow it down to the website design. What does a website design need to look like for a website to be successful? Now, you probably all work at companies or have websites of your own, work at companies who have a website. And the process may have gone something like you hire an agency, they go and do something in Photoshop and then show you a picture of your website and say, what do you think of this? And because you've been asked, what do you think of this, you feel obliged to give an opinion. But because you know more about synchronized swimming than you do about web design, your opinions are invalid. And that's not your fault, that's the fault of the person who said to you, what do you think of this? If somebody came to me and said, what do you think of this legal document? What do you think of this bioscience laboratory setup? What do you think of this charitable project plan for clean water in the third world? I wouldn't have a clue what to say. Make that thing more shiny. Don't know. So that's not how we build websites at the Tomorrow Lab. And designing in Photoshop is not how modern websites are built. This is my favorite quote here about designing in Photoshop. It says, Photoshop, that's where you make a picture of exactly what your website will never look like. Another problem with Photoshop is that you can't design for mobile there. I'll talk more about that later. And finally, this is guesswork. Asking for a finished website up front is, before a website's even been started to build, is putting the cart before the horse. So before I talk about what is in a successful website design, I just want to run through a couple examples of bad design. These are two cafeterias. I've owned both. The one on the left is black plastic. It's £1 cheaper than the one on the right that has a nice chrome finish. So objectively, you'd hope that the one on the right was better designed. I certainly did when I bought it, but it's not. The pour is splashy. There's a little knot on the inside of the lid that keeps coming loose. After you've finished pouring water, the coffee is collected inside the dome of the lid and it spills out all over the table. It's badly designed. Another example is the taps in the bathroom at the Europa Hotel. They look lovely. You walk into their bathrooms and you think, wow, I could have this in my bathroom. But when you try to wash your hands, the water is so slow that you're pressing your hands hard against the ceramic at the back to get any water on your hands. Bad design. So what are the symptoms of bad design? Poor testing. You'd think people hadn't tried these things out before they put them on the shelves. Lack of usability. They're hard to use, like the taps. Annoying user experience, like the coffee spilling over your table. And probably the most common mistake of all is thinking that visual appearance and design are the same thing. They're not the same thing at all. And that's not to say that good design has to be boring or functional or drab. It's not. This is an example of some sinks that are really well designed and work well and look awesome. So just one more thing, I suppose this is the thread that runs through the whole talk. Some words that you commonly hear when people talk about making websites. User-centric design, usability, user testing, user experience, user journeys. It's about use. Websites are for using, they're not for looking at, they're for using, and they're for using People who use your websites are people who don't care about you. What they want to do is find information or perform a task that makes their life better in some small or big way, and then move on with their life. The job of your design is to stand to the side and help them with that, not to stand in front of them pulling poses. Look how beautiful I am. So I'm going to talk about use a lot, and that's something that you really need to bear in mind. So now the ingredients of successful web design. There are 3 things that we require from you, the client, before we can start. Clear goals, an understanding of the nature of the web, and content. So I'll run through those quickly. What do you want your website to do? Don't say look good and support my brand. All websites have to do that. Pick 2 or fewer. If you pick more than two objectives for your website, it won't do as well as if you'd narrowed that down properly. These are just some examples. There are many, many more. And these objectives are what we design towards. When we're making design decisions and when we are initiating any process in web development, it's always with the objectives of your website in mind. It's not what do you think the owner of this website will think looks nice or would make their graphic design cousin happy. Glad somebody laughed at that. Okay, so the nature of the web. The web is messy, it's gloriously messy, and that's a good thing. It's democratizing. It's also built into the design principles of the web. 2 of the design principles of the web are anybody can access it and anybody can publish to it. There's some websites that, you know, like there's bad poetry. There's excruciatingly technical details about plugs and wiring that people have put on there as part of their hobby. There's websites that will cause you to raise more than an eyebrow, and there's others that will just boggle your mind here. Some of the more tame examples, I suppose. This is a very successful car leasing website. Ling's Cars, you may have seen Ling on Dragon's Den. This is a website that translates people's tattoos for them that they think are in Chinese, and quite often don't mean what they think they mean. This particular one means absolutely nothing. There's no language known to mankind. Anybody know what this one is? Yeah, Craigslist, yeah. Very successful website in North America. Bit more bizarre. This is one where you slap a man in the face with a fish by moving your mouse from right to left. Slap, slap, slap. And here's one that tells you if your computer's turned on or off. But at the end of the, you know, technically the web is HTML, CSS, JavaScript, images delivered over HTTP, but at its core, the web is people. And building for the web is an exercise in human interaction. The web is as diverse as humanity. All these people here use the web, and that's what you've got to bear in mind. That's what you're walking into whenever you're building for the web. The next thing you need to know about the web is how people consume content on the web. It used to be we could just build something that we thought we knew would fit onto a regular desktop monitor, and then along came mobile. And we said, well, we'll make a separate mobile site and maybe squeeze the desktop site onto tablets. But we can't do that anymore. This is the situation we're faced with. This is quite an old photo, so this was taken before smartwatches, smart TVs, and that ridiculous Google Glass thing came out. So when we're designing websites, we have to make sure that they work on any screen size, from Google Glass to smart TV. And that's called responsive web design. The website responds to the screen size that whoever wants to consume your content is using at the time. And it's not just screen sizes. These services here, for people who want to bookmark or read later or read a feed from your website, they'll take your content, they take your text and your images, put their own fonts, their own font colors on it, their own background, and that's all, and their logo at the top. And that's how people consume your content. Some people prefer to print websites and read them that way. Some people are blind or visually impaired and can only listen to websites. So the idea that you have control over how anybody consumes your content is an illusion. Okay, that, as the saying goes, the map is not the territory. That thing you see on your laptop or your desktop at work is not by any means what everybody sees when they view your website. So that's the web. You need to understand that before you walk into it. And the final thing is content. And normally when we talk about content, people think text and images, but there's so much more to it. Text and images certainly are part of what we need. You don't have to have an e-commerce site to put the price of your products and services on. If you have people, profiles on your website, will there be a photo? Will there be a date they joined the company? Will there be the name of their sort of the role that they perform within the company? All that data is something that we need up front. How are job advertisements structured? Will the salary be there? Any statistics and data, any graphical information that you'll be putting on the website? Do you issue press releases? How are they structured? What way is your blog structured? How do you want to be contacted? People just seem to think phone, fax, and email for some reason, as if people use faxes. Promotional material. Anytime you run an offer or a promotion, how is that information structured and how should that appear on the web? Are there any long scientific words that might not fit into a narrow column? And forms. What information do you want to collect from people? What do you want them to see when they've given you that information? If you have an e-commerce site, it's even more. Vast amounts of information attached to each individual product. Now, by me saying we need this information up front, certainly the way we work isn't that we go and say to you, go and give us all the structured data, we'll be waiting here. We would help you with that. We'd work through that with you. I suppose at this point, if we get any of those three prerequisites wrong, it's a bit like you're trying to drill a tunnel through a mountain and your users are on that side. If you don't get any of these right, you come out over here and it's an expensive mistake to fix to get to where your users are. So that's the three prerequisites. And now the main ingredients of successful web design. Typography. Typography, the fonts that you use on a website is what gives people the first impression that they have you. And that split second when they land on your website, it's the fonts that speak to people and tell them what your website is about. It's not the logo, it's not the color scheme, it's not the layout, it's none of that stuff. They will have an impression of you just from looking at the text on your site and the typography. So you have to make sure it says the right things. Here's some nice web typography. I like the quote. That looks nice. Here's how not to use web typography. That's not a real example, I just did that. But if you are talking about the G20 and the European debt crisis, do not use Comic Sans. Do not use Comic Sans full stop, by the way. Unless you're writing a comic. Even then, there are better alternatives. So typography sets the tone of voice. How do you want to appear? What do you want to say? There are some technical considerations with typography. I'll not bore you with them. Second ingredient, usability and interaction design. This is how easy it is to use a website, and this is measurable. It's something we can test, measure, and improve upon. Remember, nobody wants to use your website. They want to find information or perform a task that allows them to get on with their lives and make their lives better in some small way. You've got to make it easy for them. Nobody is going to, nobody's going to come home at night and say to their partner, I just heard at work there's this great new B2B website launch and I cannot wait to read their About Us page. Excuse me. Nobody says go and buy off Amazon because it looks class. Take a look at this hose nozzle here. You can tell roughly from where you're sitting how this feels in your hand. You know what it's like to squeeze the trigger, to rub your thumb up and down these little ridges, or pull the cap off the nozzle, or twist that little screw, and that's affordances. And if you pick that up and it wasn't like what you expected, you might not like it. It would take a little bit of time to get used to. And if every good website has affordances, and that's usability and interaction design. Thanks, Andy. Next ingredient, user experience design. Now, where usability is about how easy a website is to use, user experience design is about how it feels to be using it. It's about how people feel about you, your company, your brand, while they're using your website. It's about how they feel while they're using their website, about the website itself, and about themselves. And it's about how they feel at the prospect of using your website. We do design it. It's not quite as measurable as usability, but it's very, very important. If you put somebody in front of your website and then ask them about your brand afterwards, they're going to talk about how they were feeling, not what they were looking at. Ingredient number 4 is accessibility. Remember what I said earlier, the web is for everyone. 10% of the population have some form of disability. And if you don't take that into account, you're potentially losing 10% of your revenue or whatever results you've set for your website. Good accessibility is good usability, it's good SEO, and of course it helps your turnover. And we're not just talking about people who are blind or visually impaired and need to listen to it. We're talking about people who are deaf or hard of hearing. We're talking about people who have motor impairments and can't use the fine-grained control of a mouse, so they have to use a keyboard. We're talking about people who have cognitive disabilities. A lot of web forms you see cut out people with cognitive disabilities straight away with those stupid CAPTCHA things at the end that say, prove you're not a robot. That's not their problem, that's our problem. Color blindness as well, here's an example. This site uses red and green. It tells you, click the red button or click the green button. If you have the most common form of color blindness, it looks like that. And if you have the second most common, it looks like that. So don't just use color. Now on to visual design. Very, very important. A website that looks good will perform better than a website that looks crap. But where the problem arises is when people get bogged down in the details of visual design. Nobody ever starts off with the objective for my website, make the marketing director say, wow, but it very often turns into an unofficial objective for the site. As with everything else, every other ingredient, visual design should work with and complement the other ingredients. Just going to play a short video clip of Steve Jobs talking about design, which he sums up very well what I'm trying to say here.
Design's a really loaded word, automobiles, and so we don't really talk about design a lot around here. We actually just talk about how things work. Most people think it's how they look, but it's not really how they look, it's how they work.
I think Steve is a design champion by action, not by talking.
Sorry. Okay, well, that was Steve Jobs talking in a video that did definitely work before you all arrived. I definitely tested that, it definitely worked, and my clicker worked too. So hopefully it will work again. What he said there was, it's not about how it looks, it's about how it works. And he knows a thing or two, well, he knew a thing or two about design. Okay, let's see if I can get past that. Okay, final ingredient, performance. Slow websites lose money, slow websites lose users. Your website has to be fast. On top of everything else, Google likes fast websites and increases their rankings. But just some quick stats on that. Google always had 10 results per page. They asked their users what they wanted. They said, we want more, give us 30. It caused a half a second delay in page load time, and they lost 20% of their traffic. And Google runs on ads. Amazon did a study where they deliberately throttled their network connection by 100 millisecond increments, and for every 100 milliseconds, they lost 1% of their revenue. generally speaking, if you have an e-commerce site and you turn £1,000 a day, just by tuning it up by 1 second, all else being equal, you'll make an extra 25 grand a year. And this isn't just e-commerce sites. The Guardian, which is just an information site, focused very heavily on performance last year and saw that afterwards people were spending far more time on their site, they were returning to the site, they were reading more articles on the site. People leave slow websites. So that's it, that's the 6 ingredients and the 3 prerequisites that we need. And I call them ingredients deliberately. People very often say that building a website is like building a house, where you do the foundations and the bricks, and the electricians, plumbers, painters, plasters, whatever, come in one after the other. But it's not like that. Building a website is more like baking a cake, and that's why I said ingredients, because those ingredients have to come together, work with each other, complement each other, and in the end, rise together to give you a nice big cake. And that's what you get with successful web design. You get a website that meets the objectives you have set for it and gives you a return on your investment. Thanks very much. I'm happy to take questions.
One of your website's actually made by Visual Basic. Is that bad, or is it really need to update to new software and things like that? So we're struggling with meta tags and things like that.
Yeah.
On the other website.
If it's just spat out by the Visual Basic software,
Yeah.
that's a problem. If it's spat out by any software, that's a problem. It's not specific to Visual Basic. Yeah, I would say rebuild. Mm-hmm. Unless you can get access to the code to how it spits that code out and have good fine-grained control over that, you're going to face problems. Yeah. Anybody else?
Do you think any of the ingredients in the cake are more important than others?
No, because if they're out of balance, to stick with the cake analogy, it's going to taste off. If you leave one out, it's just not going to rise. They have to all be there, and they have to all be there in the correct amounts. Is that it?
Content, going right back to the beginning.
Yeah.
You mentioned about content being important to have up front. Do you think that only the design and the development stage needs to have input in the content, or do you take instructions from the content that comes to you?
No, the content's what you're trying to say. Your content is the message. You can't design without that being there. No. Okay. Well, we're going to do this again soon. It's on Thursday, the 16th of April. The subject is content marketing in 2015. Now you're going to say a few words about that.
Yeah, basically, it's a series of events, and we try to hold one of these thoughts. The next one's going to look at the growing importance of content marketing. And hopefully we'll also have a guest speaker along with that their talk as well. So so that's also the day. If anyone has any questions or they want to sort of pick their experience, we'll be hanging out here for 15 or 20 minutes anyway, so feel free to come along and chat with us. But, thanks very much for coming.